Greetings. Welcome to the Captive Desk. In this video, we are taking a look at Ken Ham's new book, along with Jessica DeFord's help.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Master Books Podcast. I'm Jennifer White, and I am so excited to share this new book with you, Climate Change for Kids by Ken Ham and Jessica DeFord.
Ken Ham is the founder and CEO of Answers in Genesis, that is known for his young earth creationism beliefs that include a 6,000-year-old universe, literal Adam and Eve living with dinosaurs, and those dinosaurs were also on Noah's Ark. AIG excels at spreading disinformation and targeting children with it in their homeschooling materials, along with lots of books, videos, and other media, as well as lots of dinosaurs at his attractions, with a merry-go-round of dinosaurs that is entirely designed around spreading disinformation to children about every field of science, supported by donors with very deep pockets, in his efforts to prove a Ken Ham version of mythology over every field of science that says his beliefs are unfounded in reality. Let's take a look and see if that still remains the case with what Ken and Jessica have to say about climate change. Surely they did at least 5 minutes worth of researching articles, papers, and data before writing a book on it. Let's find out.
So, Jessica, tell us a little bit about how observational science plays into the Christian worldview, or biblical worldview of climate change.
When we look at the operational science, the observable science with regards to climate change, we don't see the narrative that's being perpetuated in the media of this alarmism.
When the data is observed, Jessica doesn't see what the media reports about the data.
We can look at data sets like the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. They have publicly accessible data. I actually have the honor of giving 2 talks here at the ministry, and I walk through some of the observational science with people and download the data sets and show them that we don't need to be fearful when there's sensationalist claims about the Earth experiencing unprecedented warming or extreme weather events and things like that. We can look at that data. We can see that it doesn't go along with the narrative.
The National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration public data. Okay, good. A source we can check. Jessica also gave 2 talks at AIG sharing the data. Okay. She says the data doesn't show unprecedented warming or extreme weather events. Let's look at the data, shall we? We will use the source Jessica cited. All right, Jessica, we've got your page pulled up, and we've got 2023. The average annual temperature across the U.S. was 54.4 degrees, 2.4 degrees above the 20th century average, ranking as the nation's 5th warmest year in NOAA's 129-year climate record. It also goes on to say Louisiana, Massachusetts, Mississippi, etc., 10-year warmest year on record. We saw annual precipitation was an inch below. Some areas had their wettest areas, and other areas we had drought reached a peak in 2023. Big disasters. Last year, the U.S. experienced 28 separate billion-dollar weather and climate disasters. This surpasses 2020, which had 22 events, for the highest number of billion-dollar disasters in the U.S. on record. They list the events, how much they cost. This is a map showing the events and trends covered by 431 individual scientific papers or rapid studies, combining the evidence over 20 years, extreme heat, rainfall, flooding, drought, Together, these make up more than 2/3 of all published studies. The full list is available in this Google Sheet. And all these links will be in the description. But what you have here is extreme weather events. And we've had a lot of them. So, I don't know what she's talking about that we're not having these extreme weather events, nor that we're not having record temperatures. All right, Jessica, did your source show unprecedented warming or extreme weather events? They surely did. You surely didn't read what you are citing, or you did and you are intentionally lying, Jessica. Either way, when someone cites a source, look it up for yourself. Don't rely on what they say it says, because Jessica just showed she is being dishonest about what the source she cited actually says. Let's see what you got next.
When people ask me, do I believe in climate change? I say, of course I do. There's been climate change ever since the flood, massive climate change. And then the flood generated an ice age that caused massive climate change. If you reject the events of history that the Bible records, which the secularists do, you'll get it totally wrong in regard to what's happening in our world in regard to climate.
This is how Ken Ham operates. He sows seeds of doubt about what all the experts say, while mixing in his radical fundamentalist talking points in favor of his version of an old myth, the global flood, that never happened, that there is no evidence of, and an ice age that came and went in the past 4,300 years that there is no evidence of, that no one noticed. And that somehow proves his version of climate change? Ken Ham is an idiot.
Carbon dioxide is just a fraction of the gases in the atmosphere, and the amount in the atmosphere, the measurements show it hasn't changed. Is that right, Jessica?
Yeah, it's actually very minimal. So a lot of people don't realize that it's only about 0.04% of the gases that are in the atmosphere.
CO2 levels are 0.04% and haven't changed, says Ken and Jessica. So let's look that up. The current global average concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is 421 parts per million, 0.04% as of May 2022. That part is correct. What Jessica and Ken Ham are leaving out is this is an increase of 50% since the start of the Industrial Revolution, up from 280 parts per million during the 10,000 years prior to the mid-18th century. The increase is due to human activity. As of March 2024, the monthly average concentration of CO2 reached a new record high of 425.22 parts per million, marking an increase of 4.7 parts per million over March of 2023. And by the latest measurements, levels have further escalated to 427.48 parts per million. Ken and Jessica, you are liars, or idiots, or both. You decide. CO2 levels have doubled since the start of the Industrial Revolution and keep increasing.
There's also many positive aspects to an increase in carbon dioxide, but we never hear about the positive aspects in the media. For example, plant growth grows exponentially with an increase in carbon dioxide. A lot of farmers will actually pump their greenhouses with carbon dioxide because they know it will increase their crop yields. That's fantastic for the livestock that relies on crops, which is great news for people that rely on both. So there's a lot of aspects and good positive ecosystem benefits to an increase in carbon dioxide.
Jessica claims there are many positive aspects to an increase in CO2. Scientists have performed many experiments to see what happens when plants and agriculture crops receive extra CO2. When supplemental CO2 was pumped into the air around plants, they grew faster. For this reason, CO2 is sometimes piped into enclosed greenhouses to boost production. But greenhouse plants also have optimal amounts of water, excellent soil, and controlled temperatures. It's usually a different story out in the real world. To conduct a more real-world experiment, other studies have given plants extra CO2 plus an increase in temperature. In these conditions, many plants and crops grew poorly. In most cases, the boost from CO2 was overwhelmed by the hotter conditions. These experiments demonstrate that the myth of CO2 fertilization is false, and peer-reviewed reports find that major crops like wheat, rice, corn, and soybeans will become less productive as the world heats up. Livestock and crops will drop over dead from heat stress, floods, droughts, and other extreme weather events increased CO2 levels cause. Once again, either Jessica has cognitive issues or she is intentionally spreading disinformation.
And Jennifer, back in the time of the Vikings in the medieval era, when you go back to 900 AD to 1300 AD, did you know the Vikings were farming Greenland? So people are worried today about, global warming, things are heating up. Wait a minute, things were warmer in the past than they are now. I mean, we're able to have more farmland. Actually, if things warmed up a bit and that ice melted off Greenland, we could farm there again. So maybe that'd be a good thing.
No, Ken, it won't be a good thing. 900 to 1300 AD, Vikings were farming Greenland. But most of the farming was livestock. As it is today, most of Greenland is covered in ice. During 900 to 1300, local climate changes allowed for 3 settlements near the coast. The Norse in Greenland ate mostly meat and fish, not crops. And Greenland today, as when the Vikings were there, is like 80% covered in ice. And it's warmer today like when the Vikings lived in Greenland. And yet, they are sheep farming there, not growing vast fields of crops. Why aren't the farmers flocking to Greenland, Ken? Because it's mostly ice covered. And the areas near the coast where the few locations were for the Vikings to barely survive drown with sea level change. Sounds great, Ken. How about you show us all how to grow crops with huge yields underwater in Greenland, as it would be so fantastic. And since you are a greedy charlatan, plant crops there and show farmers everywhere how you make lots of money doing it.
All that's happening today is they blame everything on climate change because it actually comes down to the fact it's a religion.
Climate change is a religion. Evolution is a religion, etc., etc. This is the nonsense Ken Ham spreads around. Everything is a religion. His nonsense equals what all the experts in their field say in his own childlike mind of he is rubber and you are glue. Ken Ham has a crazy belief. And so, he says, so do all the experts in their fields. And that goes for everyone else. If you like a certain flavor of ice cream or none at all, that's a religion. If you enjoy sports or don't like sports, that's a religion. If you watch TV or turn the TV off, that is a religion too. When everything is a religion, the word becomes meaningless. And there goes your tax exemptions, Ken.
So some respected scientists claim the Earth will be destroyed in a few years.
So some respected scientists say the world will be destroyed in a few years. Who said that? You provided no names of these respected scientists. Yeah, no, book lady, that is not true. For a book-selling company, I would think their spokesperson would be able to read, comprehend, and to cite her sources.
When I was studying at university in the 70s, they had all these fear tactics coming out of these books saying, we're going to use up all the oil and gas, and we're going to destroy the earth, and we're going to melt the ice caps, and we're going to flood all the cities. And I remember studying books that actually made all those statements. Al Gore has made all sorts of statements in the past. None of them have come true.
Until the 1980s, global warming was little more than an eccentric scare story put about by radical environmentalists.
But of course, that's not the case. The link between CO2 and global temperature was first published 120 years ago by Svante Arrhenius. It was confirmed by Guy Stewart Callender in the 1930s and 40s, and by the 1950s it was well accepted and given a name, the theory of climatic change, or climate change for short. By the 1960s and 70s, studies were predicting that we'd soon start to see the effects of these rising levels of CO2. All this was long before the general public or even environmental groups became aware of the issue, and decades before Al Gore released his movie.
So when Ken was in school in the 70s, they tried to give him some data he calls fear tactics. Well, Ken, we have used up half of all the oil in 50 years. That means it's half gone. It's finite. As to we are going to destroy the earth, well, we have messed it up real good. About cities will flood, they are flooding, Ken. Coastal cities have, are, and will flood more as the ice caps are melting and warmer waters expand. Almost like the many scientists in the 1970s were right about climate change, Ken. So you heard them, but chose to ignore them. And Al Gore. Oh, cripes. That's all Ken Ham knows about climate change, is Al Gore said something, and he is a Democrat, so he must be a demon, Illuminati, or some such nonsense he is sowing in the minds of his followers.
Ken mentioned Al Gore. Well, he's made predictions about Arctic ice being depleted. And when we look at data sets like the National Polar Institute, National Snow and Ice Data Center, that one, you can go on their website and you can actually see that the Arctic summer sea ice this past summer in 2023 was actually higher than the previous 10-year average. But you don't hear about them making that, showing that information in the actual data that they're presenting. It's just sensationalist claims that the ice is receding, that polar bears are going to be decimated as a result of that. Polar bears are used as a mascot for garnering empathetic responses, especially in children's programming a lot. But polar bears are flourishing. Their populations are striving. They're doing just fine.
Al Gore said Arctic ice is being depleted, melting, and that is wrong, Jessica says. She cites the National Snow and Ice Data Center and says sea ice was higher in 2023 over the previous 10 years. Once again, I like when Jessica actually cites these sources. Okay, once again, we're going to look up Jessica's source, and we're going to look up the Arctic Sea Ice Report from the NOAA. Sea ice extent was 6th lowest in the satellite record, 1979 to present, and downward trends continue. The last 17 September extents, 2007 to 23, are the 17 lowest in the record. The amount of multi-year ice was largely unchanged from 2022, as multi-year extent remained far lower than in the 1980s, with minimal old ice greater than 4 years old. Average sea ice thickness for the 22-23 winter was lower than the previous winter, near the 2011-23 average. Volume at the end of the 22-23 winter was the same as the previous year. October 2023 sea ice extent globally was 970,000 square kilometers, less than the previous record low from October 2016. The Arctic sea ice extent for October 2023 ranked as the 7th smallest in the satellite record at 6.37 million square kilometers. July is the warmest month in the Arctic, and hence also the month of peak ice loss. As of the middle of July 2024, extent is declining at an above-average pace. Sea ice is mostly gone in Hudson Bay, and there has been extensive retreat in the Barents and Laptev Seas. The satellite data reveals a small area of unusually dense sea ice formed last winter near Wrangel Island. Aha! So, one little spot gained some ice. That's what Jessica found. So she was reading it. She just ignored all the rest. Because everywhere else lost ice, and the ice isn't as thick. I can see where Jessica tried real hard looking through this data to find one cherry-picked item and dismisses all the rest that shows sea ice is disappearing. Wrong again, Jessica. You are an idiot or a liar. And Jessica says the polar bears are flourishing. Let's look up what it says about polar bears, because I am getting the feeling it won't be what Jessica said it says. Status of the polar bear populations. Why do some people say there are more bears than ever? The number of polar bears worldwide is not increasing. Some populations are recovering after their numbers were vastly reduced by uncontrolled hunting in the 1960s. But that potential for growth is running headfirst into declining carrying capacity in some regions due to loss of sea ice habitat. Related to this, residents of many communities in Hudson Bay are seeing more polar bears. These polar bears are increasingly getting into food caches, entering camps, and posing risks to communities and residents. The observation that people are seeing more bears in and around sites of human activities is real evidence of a change from the past conditions northern residents knew. Western science-based knowledge and evidence shows that in the Hudson Bay system, polar bear body condition has been declining. Bears are having fewer cubs are surviving after birth, and the population size has declined. These two different pieces of knowledge and evidence are easy to integrate, as malnourished bears spend more time on land for longer periods. More are venturing into settlements where they are looking for food, leading to increased polar bear-human conflicts. The updated 2021 data from the Polar Bear Specialist Group says 3 populations are in decline, 2 populations are increasing, 4 populations are stable, and 10 populations are data deficient. By 2040, scientists predict that only a fringe of ice will remain in northeast Canada and northern Greenland, when all other large areas of summer ice are gone. This last ice area is likely to become important for polar bears and other life that depends on ice. A projection of sea ice in the archipelago, supported by the World Wildlife Fund, shows that much of the region is facing significant ice loss in the coming decades, with potential serious consequences for polar bears. Global polar bear numbers are projected to decline by 30% by 2050. Polar bears are not thriving, nor will they be thriving, Jessica.
Coral bleaching. The Great Barrier Reef in Australia is often used as an example, but the Great Barrier Reef is experiencing 36-year record highs in coral. The coral is thriving there, and corals can actually naturally respond from a bleaching event. They can come back from that too. And so we don't hear about that in the media either.
Jessica says the reef is fine. It's recovering from mass bleaching events. Let's see what the data says. Aerial surveys were conducted over 1,000 reefs spanning the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park and Torres Strait. Coral bleaching was observed on 73% of surveyed reefs within the marine park and 6% in the Torres Strait. In 2024, the Great Barrier Reef is experiencing a mass coral bleaching event that has affected 73 to 75% of surveyed reefs. This event is the fifth in the last decade and the seventh on record, and was caused by elevated sea surface temperatures due to climate change. Scientists have estimated that up to 90% of coral reefs worldwide are at risk of being completely wiped out by 2050. Oh, wow, big surprise. Jessica is lying again. What a shocker. The reefs are in big trouble. Once again, she finds one little event in 22-23 where we had relatively calm waters. There was a slight cooling in the area. However, once that small local event is over, we're right back to warmer waters, and they are bleaching out. This year may be the worst.
In America, it's one of the cleanest countries in the world, actually.
Ken says America is one of the cleanest countries in the world. Let's look that up too. Out of the list of 180 countries, the U.S. comes in at number 27 on the 2018 Environmental Performance Index, which scores countries based on their performance in a number of categories covering environmental health and ecosystem vitality. You can also find other lists. The top 10 comes in at Estonia, Luxembourg, Germany, Finland, United Kingdom, Sweden, Norway, Austria, Switzerland, Denmark. Those are the 10 cleanest countries. Now, to give the benefit of the doubt, which I have a lot of trouble giving Ken Ham any benefit of the doubt, but let's also look up, maybe he meant clean as emitters of CO2. As of 2022, China is the world's largest emitter of carbon dioxide, releasing 11.4 billion metric tons, while the United States is the second largest, releasing 5.1 billion metric tons. Even though the United States no longer leads the world in total annual carbon dioxide emissions, because they did, it was still, as of 2021, releasing about 5 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide per year, which was about 13.49% of the total global emissions, more than twice that of all 28 countries in the European Union. Either way you look at it, you're wrong again, Ken. You are a liar and or a dum-dum.
And it reminds me of those people that will have cattle roaming around and yet they're starving, but because they believe they could be their in the incarnation of their grandma or something like that.
So Ken Ham decides to make a snotty comment about other religious beliefs and their dietary restrictions. Wow, Ken, you are a POS. How dare you? Ken Ham is a thin-skinned crybaby when it comes to his beliefs, and how dare anyone question my beliefs? Yet he dares mock someone else's. What a piece of garbage. What a hypocrite. What a giant jerk. Ken Ham, You're unbelievable, man. You're just unbelievable how you can mock somebody else's religious beliefs and dietary restrictions. Have you read the Bible?
Predictions that don't come true. We mentioned the 1970s, there was a global cooling. They thought we were going to be in this another ice age that didn't come true.
Oh, cripes. This nonsense again? Global cooling, nor being in an ice age, was not a prediction from the 1970s that didn't come true. Global cooling was a conjecture, especially during the 1970s, of imminent cooling of the Earth, culminating in a period of extensive glaciation due to the cooling effects of aerosols or orbital forcing. Some press reports in the 1970s speculated about continued cooling. These did not, I repeat, these did not accurately reflect the scientific literature of the time, which was generally more concerned with warming from an enhanced greenhouse effect. By the 1970s, the scientific community was increasingly concerned about the potential for global warming due to the rising levels of greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide. A 1975 study by Wallace Broecker, for instance, used the term global warming and predicted that the increasing concentration of CO2 would lead to significant warming. The growing body of evidence supporting the greenhouse effect and its impact on climate far outweighed the relatively few studies on global cooling.
Greta Thunberg, she actually in 2018 put on her social media that a top scientist was claiming that all of humanity was going to be wiped out if we wouldn't stop using fossil fuels. So she made that prediction in 2018 for the 2023 year. Well, humanity is still here, so that's another prediction that didn't come true.
So Greta Thunberg posted a tweet from some scientist that said the world would end in 2023. That was in 2018, and the world didn't end in 2023. That's not what it says. It says a top climate scientist is warning that climate change will wipe out all of humanity unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years. Now let's look up what the AP reported on this claim. It says the claim is Greta Thunberg recently deleted a tweet she posted in 2018 in which she said that the world will end in 2023. The AP's assessment is missing context. While Thunberg did delete a 2018 tweet about the urgency of addressing climate change, she did not say the world would end in 2023. Her tweet included a quote from an article that said an influential scientist warned climate change will wipe out all humanity unless fossil fuel use was ended over the next 5 years. Further complicating the issue, that article incorrectly summarized the scientist's speech. He never made such comments. But Thunberg never said the world was set to end in 2023. The young activist was quoting an article that was paraphrasing a speech by a Harvard University professor of atmospheric chemistry. The scientist said the world had limited time to act to reverse the disappearance of floating ice volume in the Arctic, or there would be drastic consequences, not that the world would end in 5 years. The article Thunberg quoted went on to contextualize remarks made by the scientist, James Anderson, about how carbon levels in the atmosphere were causing Earth's polar ice caps to rapidly disappear to a point at which reducing emissions wouldn't be enough to stop or reverse it. The Forbes article said Anderson called for an acceleration of the effort to halt and remove carbon pollution and a new effort to reflect sunlight away from the Earth's poles within 5 years, after which point he warned that recovery would no longer be possible. Anderson's assessment of humanity's timeline for action is likely accurate, given that his diagnosis and discovery of Antarctica's ozone holes led to the Montreal Protocol of 1987. Anderson's research was recognized by the United Nations in September of 1997. He subsequently received the United Nations Vienna Convention Award for Protection of the Ozone Layer in 2005, and has been recognized by numerous universities and academic bodies for his research. So the facts of this story are: social media users and conservative commentators like Ken Ham and Jessica DeFord are taking the climate activists' 2018 tweet out of context, aka they are liars. Links are in the description. I found the original story and I found Gretta's tweet. Check them out. Read it for yourself.
And these other people, they have their prophets. It's a religion, and they have their prophets within their religion of this climate change movement. And their prophets over and over again are wrong.
We will not give in to the thinkers.
You people are as loud as you are ignorant. Now get back on your turnip trucks and go home.
So once again, Ken is calling climate change a religion with its own prophets. Is that all you can say? You're repeating the same outdated and debunked talking points. It's time for you to step aside, Ken. Climate change is a scientific reality, not a religion. There are no prophets, priests, or apologists, as Ken Ham absurdly claims. His beliefs have warped his understanding, turning him into a liar and a bigot who dodges the truth. He ignores the scientific evidence that has been solid for over a century, preferring instead to spread misinformation. Neither Ken, Jessica, nor any other creationist or climate change denier have bothered to read the scientific papers dating back to the 19th century. They don't want the truth. They want to lie. To what end? I don't know. Perhaps just to cling to willful ignorance, a trend that's sadly gaining popularity these days. Everything Ken, Jessica, and Jennifer said is a lie. Worse, they cite sources that anyone can check, yet they shamelessly misrepresent what those sources actually say. It's a disgraceful display of dishonesty and a complete lack of integrity. Shame on you. Thanks for watching. Links are in the description. Please read them for yourself. If I got anything wrong, let me know in the comments and I will correct it. And I hope to see you next time.